Why did I stay with my ex-husband for 3 years after I found out that he had a double life and had been cheating on me since we were literally engaged? Sorry, I'm crying because I actually had to drop my son off at Jake's house today, and standing there face to face in his doorway just triggers me. Feels like my skin's crawling. This is one of the biggest questions that I've gotten in my social medias from the beginning, and I've never really addressed it. But now that everybody's more like conscious and aware of the trad wife trap and that lifestyle, I feel like I can finally dive into it just a little bit. 22 years into my marriage, I found out that my husband had a double life. And immediately, I had this feeling of, I want to change the locks. I want to run. This guy's a nightmare. He's a monster. He's not even half the person that I thought he was. And I already knew that he was an abusive asshole, and I'd been stuck with him for 22 years because of the Mormon teachings around divorce. The teaching is you can't get divorced. I found out about his double life while my husband was on a road trip, so I wouldn't see him for 10 more days from the time that he confessed to me. What had been happening to the time that I saw him again was over a week and a half. So I had a lot of time to really prep and think about what I wanted to do. And again, every instinct in my body told me to run, to get out of there, to tell him to fuck off and never, ever, ever have anything to do with him again. But that's actually not what ended up happening. When he came home 10 days later, I was there, and I stayed with him for the next 3 years. And people always wonder why, like, what the hell were you thinking? So there are 2 memories from that 10-day time span between finding out and then him coming home and making the decision to stay that I still can remember like it was yesterday. I remember a couple days after finding out, being in my master bedroom. We were living in a luxury condo in Ogden, Utah, overlooking the Ogden Temple, and we had these beautiful floor-to-ceiling windows, and I had this huge restoration hardware bed, and I was waking up one morning and making the bed, and I was considering all the ways in which I could possibly leave. I had been a Mormon stay-at-home mom for 22 years. I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have any job skills. I didn't have an education. I had no way to support myself, and I had 4 children that were financially dependent on me. I remember making my bed that morning and pulling the comforter up and putting the pillows on, and we had just bought a new mattress. It was some fancy, like, spine supportive, like it was like sleeping on a cloud, and every night in that bed, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I absolutely love this bed. I remember making that bed that morning and thinking, if I leave him, I'm also leaving the comforter, the bed frame, the mattress, the bedroom, the bathroom. I'm leaving everything. I can't divorce him and keep my home. And just that overwhelming realization of I can't provide for myself at all. So if I want to tell this asshole to go fuck off, then that also means that I'm not going to be sleeping in this bed, and then my kids aren't going to be sleeping in their beds. They aren't going to be sitting down at their desks to do their homework. They aren't going to be riding their skateboards around the block with the neighbors. I will lose everything to leave him. A few days later, I drove down to Salt Lake City to go to Trader Joe's, and as I walked into my condo with bags full of groceries and put them on the island and started unpacking them into the fridge and cupboards and stuff, I remember thinking, if I leave him, I won't have the ability to buy food. Like my son, who was like 6 years old at the time, him having his favorite little vanilla yogurts and his little cheese sticks was dependent upon that man. During that 10 days from confession to him coming home also, we had conversations over the phone, and I told him, I don't think that I can do this. I don't think that I can forgive the adultery. I don't think that I want to be with you. I think I want a divorce. And he made it really clear to me, if you leave me, I will destroy you. I will quit my job. I will never work again. I will make sure that you never see the kids again. As my followers know, this is like the biggest part of my story. He also threatened mutual unaliving, and he told me multiple times that that was his first choice. If you file for divorce, then I'm just done. It's going to be a mutual unaliving, and I'm not going to deal with divorce. So in order for me to keep my bed, keep my toothbrush, keep the ability to buy groceries, keep my vehicle, put gas in the car, provide a home for my kids, he came home, and I told him I'm here for it. We're going to work through this. We'll get some counseling, and we'll go see the bishop, and we're going to make this family work. I was already terrified of him, and then I was living with this pain of 100 affairs and just this incredible devious double life and stuff that was so big that I couldn't even process it or cope with it. But everything was dependent on this man. The food that my kids were eating, the beds that we were sleeping in, the cars that we were driving, it was all dependent on him. I had met him when I was a 19-year-old girl, and because my Mormon church had told me to stay at home and not work and be a mom, that's all I had done. I had invested 22 years at that point in just being a Mormon trad wife, and it left me without resources. I started trying to find ways to make money for myself. I was selling antiques. I had a multi-level marketing job. Of course, I'm Mormon. Of course, I had an MLM. And it's like, if I can just get up to like $2,500 a month, if I can just earn that, at least I can pay for rent and food. And I could never get up to that level. $2,500 a month would have set me free, would have let me told him to fuck off, would have allowed me to pack my kids' bags, walk out the door, and drive away. That 3 years that I stayed with Jake, I have never felt more like a captive in my life than during that time span. I had to watch everything I said. I had to keep myself stick skinny. He liked my hair a certain way. He was so controlling about everything that I did and said. And it was hard because I hated him. If I had been some back page girl that he was paying for, I couldn't have had any less attachment to him. The only thing that really saved me was that we lived apart. For part of that time, he moved down to Arizona. I was still in Utah. And then, again, for financial reasons, I decided to reconcile with him one last time and move in with him, which meant relocating down to Gilbert, Arizona. And it was 6 weeks later that I caught him picking up a 19-year-old escort. He would then attempt to take my life. He would be brutally violent during my divorce. And the only reason that I couldn't go no contact, the only reason that I couldn't get my distance from this man was money. My Mormon church had made me dependent on Jake from the time I was a teenager. And I had no means of supporting myself without him. By the way, 3 days after he abandoned me for the last 19-year-old escort, I wasn't able to buy $43 worth of groceries at Trader Joe's. I would become homeless. My kids would become homeless. I would lose everything to leave that man, and it's still impacting us today, 5 years later. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that it's a problem. And we have to stop teaching our daughters to be financially dependent on a man. The number one predisposer to domestic violence is financial dependence. Number one. So why are we doing that? Just kind of seems like a no-brainer to me. And I think the hardest thing for me, my biggest regret as a mom, is that all of those years that I was a stay-at-home mom because I thought that it was the best thing for my kids and I wanted them to have the best life, those years of me not being able to provide for them are what eventually led to me not even being able to have a home for us to live in, groceries to eat, the ability to put gas in the car. And I would say this is really hard to hear, but we have to start listening to this. You are not a good mom if you cannot provide financially for yourself and your kids. You're not. All of the cookie baking and the little preschools that I did at home and taking them to their gymnastics lessons and things like that did not matter when we were sleeping in my car.